All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to do a quick welcome. Yeah, is everybody awake, mostly? Did anybody go to the Endgame party last night? Anyone? There's a few people those people are struggling in now after Endgame had way too much fun last night. All right, welcome to the third annual BSides DC. We are the Hacktoberfest of BSides, what we bill ourselves as. Quick show of hands, who's been here before? Wow, tons of people. Any returning black badges in the house? Anyone? I'm gonna turn off that radio before I deafen everybody. And who's new to BSides? Who's this, like your first BSides? Wow, about half, cool. Well, welcome. So just some quick housekeeping items before we start. Please silence all the things that make noise. I know you have a really cool ringtone, but everybody else doesn't need to hear it. Respect the speakers, organizers, volunteers, and everybody else. Adhere to our principles. If you want to see those, they're in the program.
Don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk is the main rule. And the main thing is participate. There's tons of things to do today. There's Lockpick Village. There's Internet of Things Village. There's plenty of great talks lined up. I mentioned Lockpick Village.
Wireless CTF.
Wireless CTF, everything else. So definitely take a chance to take a look around, especially if you're new. Try checking out a bunch of different things. All right, who's who? Orange badges are organizers. That's myself, Bob Weiss, my other co-director, any of our other people, Duran, our finance director. Volunteers, yellow badges. These are people who are volunteering to help us put this together, direct you where you need to go and do everything like that. Speakers, yeah, volunteers will be wearing the rust-colored shirts. Speakers, they were wearing the white badges. Check them out. Feel free to ask them questions in the hallway. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you. Green is our sponsors. We cannot put this event on and have such a great event without our sponsors. So check them out. Go to their tables. Say hi to them. Security, they're wearing the red shirts. Obey them. Blue attendees, that's you guys. Thank you very much for coming out. Okay, this is our third year. In 2012, Mark Boltz and Bill Fisher emailed Jack Daniel and said, hey, why isn't there BSides in DC? And he's like, congratulations, you guys are putting it on. So 3 years later, here we are. This is the first year with the Crypt Kids Con. That's upstairs. You'll see them walking around with their super awesome flashing badges that I am jealous of. We sold more tickets in about the same time as last year. This is the second largest BSides globally, only second to Las Vegas. The schedule is available on Confu. I'll put that link up in a little bit. So a quick tour of it. Internet of Things Village, that's in London 1. That's basically straight this way over by the elevators. They ran it at DEF CON. They called us and said, hey, we'd like to bring it to BSides DC, so check it out. It's Internet of Things devices and probably some So Hopelessly Broken router hacking as well. Locksport Village there in London 2. That's down the hallway past the elevators. They'll be there all day today and all day tomorrow. Let you play with tools, crack locks, open things up. Please do not take the locks. They have some for sale. Ask questions. Please also don't practice on any of the locks in the hotel. The wire. Kahuna. Don't listen to that guy. Wireless CTF, that's upstairs on the second floor in the junior ballroom. That is open to conference attendees, so go check that out. There will be a CTF there, and you can also learn from those guys. Crypt Kids, that starts at 10 a.m., 10:30 is the Crypt Kids keynote. That will be in this room after we reset the rooms for the 2 tracks. So any attendees are welcome to check that out as well. The Crypt Kids keynote is Alicia Kazakowicz. It's going to be very interesting from the sound of it. It's something outside of what we usually do in the computer security field, but I think it's going to be very interesting. The Crypt Kids Con, I do definitely want to give a shout out to Jenny, Mick, and David. They did a ton of work on this and really, I think, knocked it out of the park, so it's going to be super cool. All right, schedule, just really quick. Schedule is on Confu. Big thanks to Darth Null for setting that up for us. So it's confu.com. There's a link for BSides DC. That's optimized for your phone, so you can look at it by time, by speaker, by track, everything like that. So, and it has all the descriptions of the talks and the bios of the speakers in there, so you can look it up, carry it with you. Super handy. It also has the most up-to-date list. We had 3 talk changes that are listed in there. They're all on Sunday, so the program will be a little bit behind Confu. At registration, they also have the list of the talks that have changed.
Yeah, so let me just chime in. Confu is really great, not only for our con, but for others if you do others. It's, you know, when you look at it, say again? I'll get closer to the microphone. So Confu is really good, not only for our con, but for other cons. They handle DEF CON and some of the BSides and a lot of the other events. So it's a graphical, mobile-friendly website. You can look at the schedule and sort of very easy to hit on your phone. So recommend that you hit that, and I say it's very useful. Is Dave in the audience? Thank you, Dave. Dave is the Confu guy.
All right, so on the subject of thanks, we have to go through our sponsors again. These are all people who are helping put this con on. So our Engage the Audience sponsors, Varus Group's Adaptive Threat Division, SANS and NetWars. Did anyone do NetWars last night? I think I see a couple of NetWars t-shirts. Did you guys have fun doing NetWars last night? I think that turned out really great. So it sounds like that might be something we're going to do in future years, so keep an eye out for that in next year. All right, Above and Beyond sponsors, HP, this is their third year with us. Cobalt Strike, this is our third year, and they're our lanyard sponsor this year, so thanks to them. Aruba is back again. CSC/Tenacity is back again. This is their third straight year. And our new sponsors, Valiant Solutions and Endgame. Thank you to Altus Consulting. They're also sponsoring the party tonight, so big thanks to them. FireEye returning this year. Palo Alto Networks returning this year. Fidelis returning this year as well. And Booz Allen Hamilton. Above and Beyond, more Above and Beyond sponsors. Milton Security, GDIT, Antietam, Tenable, MITRE. Our core supporter sponsors, Hacker Warehouse. Go to Garrett's table out there. He has cool stuff. System One, ClearJobs.net, Threat Connect, Evident.io, GuidePoint Security. Other thanks, these are other companies that are supporting us in other ways. So Critical Stack, Sophos for the networking gear. Speaking of the network, there is a wireless network. The SSID says the password is in it. That's the conference network for you guys. Please don't hack the conference network. iFixit, they donated tools for the Crypt Kids Village upstairs. Tool, obviously, Tool DC putting on the Lockpick Village for us every year. They're doing a great job. We really appreciate them coming back. The Iron Horse Pub for hosting us tonight. The Marriott for giving us the space to have the con in. No Starch Press and Independent Security Evaluators. Worthy organizations? Yes.
So I want you guys to know, you all haven't paid a lot of money for your tickets, right? And the reason we're able, BSides organizations nationally, internationally, and us, right, are able to keep that ticket price down is because of these sponsors, right? Without the sponsors, this event does not happen. Most of the money for putting this event on comes from the sponsorship. So take some time. If you see anyone with a green badge or you stop by the booths, thank them, listen to them, stop by the booths, understand what they're pitching or what they're trying to promote, and again, they are what is putting on this conference. So again, recognize that.
Thank you guys. All right, so our worthy organizations, we do some fundraising here through sales of things in the swag shop, which will be open later today. We do try to donate every year to EFF and both EFF and Hackers for Charity. So we want to give back to the community and support things that are important to us. Okay, the important part, the party tonight, the fest in Hacktober. It's at the Iron Horse Tap Room. It'll begin at 7:30. Again, Altus Consulting Corporation. Thank you, Jacob Porter and Altus Consulting Corporation for sponsoring the party for this year. There will be drink tickets, and we're featuring a list of local beers, so Virginia, Maryland, DC, Delaware. And finally, the team. This is all the people who have been working for the last year to put all of this together, spending nights, weekends, everything else. So big thanks to everybody here on this list. If you see them, if you see a volunteer, if you see an organizer, definitely thank them for their effort. So it's not a trivial thing to put this on. And obviously, big thanks to Jack Daniel for kicking us in the butt and making us do it.
Alex, you didn't put yourself on that list.
I know I didn't put myself on that list.
Anyway, big thanks to Alex Norman also.
All right, so with that, I will let Bob introduce our keynote, Mr. G. Mark Hardy.
Thanks a lot. So I've known G. Mark for, I don't know, at least 8 or 9 years. He is the founder and president of National Security Corp. He is an internationally recognized speaker. And I don't know, 2 years ago, G. Mark and I did a talk, and he literally ran in from, what was the name of the mountain?
Army 10 Miler.
The Army 10 Miler in the middle of the talk. He was like, okay, I'm here. So thanks for the Army 10 Miler for moving their event. So they had it last week, so he could be here today. So anyway, G. Mark Hardy, thanks.
Thank you, Bob. And we're going to get to see how much hacking they did on my laptop while I was away. Survey says. Dun, da, da, da. Okay, welcome. Hello, Washington, D.C. You need more Starbucks or something like that. Anyway, my name's G. Mark Hardy. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to make it really tough for the camera guys. I'm going to walk all over the place. If that's a problem, let me know. And I will go hold the podium like most frightened presenters. I want to talk to you about credit card fraud. Who here's got credit cards? Yeah, we got debit cards. Got them. Okay, who here never raises your hand when you're asked to raise your hand? That would be, okay, that guy right there, at least. Okay, either that or you've checked out of the financial system. I want to talk a little bit about the direction we're going. If you've noticed, a lot of your cards are different this year when we get things. Thank you. There we go. And here I am. I'm so used to working without a microphone. I got too many of these things at home. They make great collector's items. So we'll have to back up for the recording. Yes, no, and we'll start over again. Anyway, think about it. What's been going on with all these credit card breaches? We look at things like at Target and Sally's and Home Depot, and of course there's more coming, but what do they all got in common? Yeah, they all got whacked. They got whacked in a pretty big way. And what they're going after, what we're finding after, is criminals are going after credit card and debit card information. It's really kind of a little bit back. If you go back to Willie Sutton, remember the bank robber when they asked him, why do you rob banks? His answer was, because that's where the money is. Well, this is where the money is. Now, it's last year's Verizon data breach report, but, we can still squeak a little bit out of it. They said, hey, it's the year of the retailer breach. Now, of course, any year could probably be the year of the retailer breach. It's just the nature of things, because with so much information available for compromise, it's really, really kind of hard to say no if you're an attacker, particularly if you don't even have to gain physical access to a system to get all the goodies that come out of it. And so what we want to think about is what's going on here. Card fraud, it's a huge industry. $11 billion in 2013, went up to about 12 and change in 2014, and still trying to get some final numbers. $16 billion when you throw in the cost of all that credit card remediation. We're going to watch your credit history for, like, seriously? Remember that OPM hack? What did they come out after the OPM? Anybody here? Yeah, you're probably part of that if you've got a ever had a clearance. And they say, oh, we'll give you free credit monitoring for a year. Like, seriously, you think the Chinese have done all that so they can steal your credit cards? Dudes, hello. Anyway, credit cards, oh, yes, they do want your money, and about $16 billion total. Well, the problem is it's expensive. Banks in general eat about 63% of that loss, almost 2/3 of it. The rest goes to the merchant, saying, okay, if a merchant didn't actually get that 3-digit CVV on the back, or they didn't swipe the card because, oh, I left my card at home, but I remember my number, or card not present, think online, all those folks tend to pay for it. Well, the thing is, what's missing from that equation? You! How much do you get ripped off? I don't know, because you might not know either, unless you're kind of meticulous about checking your statements. I even got popped about 10 years ago, and I missed it because I was on the road like I always am, and there's like a $10 charge. I read a couple years later, these guys stole 2 million cards. They made one $10 charge on each of the 2 million cards, and that's it. They threw the numbers away. Well, that was actually a pretty smart business model, because they got away with it. Because $10 is not worth getting on the phone and arguing with your bank for 45 minutes. So you let it go, and it scales up pretty well. Well, the U.S. has got a huge disproportionate amount of volume on this, mostly because, well, we don't really have those chip and pin cards that all the Europeans use, because, well, we're Americans, we're better, we're smarter, maybe. Well, so what's happened is banks has defaulted these neural network type things. The systems that are basically mainframe applications that run just like a giant firewall, if then else, if then else, if then else. And you can screw with those rule sets if you want, and you can do it legally. So, for example, if you want to see if your bank is using a certain type of fraud prevention, and you're getting ready to go buy something at Best Buy, because it's coming up for shopping season, here's what you do. Take your credit card, go to the gas station, authorize your gas, but then cancel it. Then drive down to Best Buy and buy your stuff and see what happens. All right, that 1-2 punch ought to kick into one of those firewall rules, and your card ought to either be, hey, was there a problem with it or declined or whatever. Now, you haven't committed fraud. It's your own card. But what you're doing is like you're doing a good hacker, you're probing like a black box these rule sets, and that's exactly what criminals have done over the last few years. They've probed out that entire rule set and they've kind of figured it out. And so this chip and pin or chip and signatures we're doing in the US is not going to solve this problem. It just changes the nature of the fraud, because if you think about it, we're going to find out that it really doesn't do a whole lot for things like online or card not present. So card fraud is complex. It's not a bunch of computers dueling it out. It's not like some Star Trek thing where you have to report to the disintegration chamber because your sector was bombed. No, these are set up to static defenses. Attackers attack next week or next month. Whenever we push the updates, and it's a constantly losing battles. By the way, anybody sign up for Apple Pay? How's that working for you? You're like smiling. Was it easy? No, seriously, was it easy or hard to set up Apple Pay for your bank? Relatively easy. Anybody have like a super easy way, just provision your card and go? Anybody had to go like show up at a bank or actually do a phone call or do some other thing? Yeah, because when Apple Pay started out, what happened is Apple, they're brilliant. They did the crypto well, they did the near field communications well, they did the interface with all the switches. They didn't think very carefully about how do we provision the card, and it figured out pretty quickly with a stolen credit card number and just create an iTunes account, you can now provision your iPhone 6 with a stolen card, and now you got Apple Pay. But Apple Pay is card present, so very low fraud concern, charges always go through. But where's the card? It's either in your stock drawer or somebody else's stock drawer, it's stolen. So some of the banks that started doing Apple Pay early on to do the easy provisioning, 6,000% increase in fraud. Massive spike in fraud. Because what you do, you go ahead and you steal one of these things, and then you come back and you go to the Apple store, and you said, hey, I got one of these iPhones yesterday, and I liked them so much, I want to buy them for everybody in my company. And I'm going to pay for it with Apple Pay. And the clerk's going, wow, this is wonderful. Apple's changing the world. But of course, it's all stolen. So Apple was really one of the biggest victims of that. And they don't want to admit that. I've gotten emails from Apple saying, hey, we understand you're saying things about us. I said, well, you guys have more lawyers than I do, so no, I'm not going to talk to you. You know what you did, go fix it. And like anything else, we're starting to see improvements, but usually early adopters catch the first arrows. So, typical fraud prevention, we're looking for this anomalous user behavior. Well, what do I mean? Think about it in the beginning. For those of us, hey, Kahuna, with gray hair, we remember back in the 70s, or no hair in your case, but in any case, yeah, we're going to have to edit all this stuff out. That's another thing I like about BSides. You don't have to be politically correct, even in Washington, D.C. So what happened was this. If you remember in the old days, when you got your first credit card, you went down to the merchant, you buy something, they had a little onion skin booklet, like little 8-point font, so you had to be younger than we are now to read it, and they listed literally every single stolen credit card that week. And then the next week they'd issue a new book. It's like a very, very small certificate revocation list. But the problem is that it didn't scale too well when things got a little bit bigger. Okay, so now what happened, I remember there was a clerk who's like, I can't find your number in the book. It's a good thing, lady, and that's probably why she was there making minimum wage. Well, the problem is that as more people started using cards, this hot list got bigger and bigger and bigger. Like a .host file, which you couldn't go ahead and scale to the size of the internet, you had to have something a little bit bigger and better. So what do? We went from these knuckle-buster run your card through to these online validation using this, a modem, 1200 baud, and 24 and things like that. But here's the crazy thing. Do you know what percentage of the merchants still use an unauthenticated, unencrypted dial-up modem to run your credit card? About 90%. Because if you want to do it across the internet, you have to pay extra to the merchant bank. So why would you do that if you're a dry cleaner? You don't want to spend extra money on it, so you put up with it. So the cool thing is, so you can check for authorization in real time. Because now you had a little bit of latency with that little book, right? You could steal a card on Monday, but nobody would know about it till the next week. But now you can go ahead and do a real-time check online. Well, that's pretty cool. And so now we can tell if your card not only is stolen or not, we can tell if there's a balance on it and whether or not the merchant should take it. Merchants like this because it helped to protect them then from people going ahead, having cards that were out of money. And if you didn't know that when you did the knuckle buster thing and then you submitted it to your bank and 3 days later you found out there's no money there, you got ripped off. Now we don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, the problem is today, for those Monty Python fans, how do you know she's a witch? Of course, what's the answer? Yeah, she floats. Right, she must be made of wood. So we look at all these solutions that come out of these mainframe type things, these big corporate, I mean, these are $100 million companies. And oh, by the way, you know, working with Mach 37, who Dan Woolley's out there, and yeah, I got their little card in here. But talk to these folks, by the way. That's really cool. They're a cybersecurity accelerator, and they helped fund this little guy here, which is why I did all this research for you guys. So what they would do then is we learn a behavior of a user and look for anomalous stuff. Now, do any of us ever do anomalous things in our life? That sort of defines us, right? And so it works really well for grandma who's in Ohio who doesn't drive more than 20 miles from her house and never charges more than $40 on her credit card. So if her card shows up in East Los Angeles on a Friday night for $800 at a Best Buy, probably not grandma. That's easy to spot. But the thing is that you get a lot of false positives that way. And so even in spite of that, $12 billion get past it. And this is like an intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, but this is more of an IPS system if it's blocking transactions. People aren't happy when your card doesn't work. So things are changing. On the 1st of October, just a couple weeks ago, what's happened? They've just realigned the liability rules. By the way, you got till 2017 if you run a gas pump. And the idea is this: if you're a bank and you issue cards and you don't have that little chip on there, then you're paying for the fraud. If you're a merchant and you don't take the little chip, you're paying for the fraud. But what if the card doesn't have it? Doesn't matter, you're paying for it. Well, what if you both are guilty? Well, then you have an arm wrestling or something. You know, they all worked out the rules, but this is not the federal government. This is not the banks that are saying this. This is the switches, Visa and MasterCard and Discover and American Express. By the way, there's 20 of them out there in the United States alone. Here's the crazy thing. You take a look at the fraud equation. How much fraud losses do Visa have every year? 0. And MasterCard, 0. Why? Because it's in their contract. We don't pay for fraud. In fact, it's even better than that. Fraudulent transaction comes through their system. They get a little percentage of that too. They're actually making money on fraud. Dude, that is one rockin' industry. Now I know why your stock has been doing so well. Except there's some other issues coming up, so before you go out and buy their stock, I'll give you some pointers on that. So how are we doing so far? So as of this past month, 18%, up from about 3% of the credit cards now have a chip. Who here has got at least one card with a chip on it? Look around. Yeah, that's about 70%. Who here still has the old legacy ones in your wallet from some of the old stuff? Yeah, so we're in that transition phase, even though the rules have kicked in. By the way, they estimate it's going to cost about $8 billion for all of these donut shops and the Chinese restaurants and the dry cleaners and everybody else to upgrade all of their hardware. Well, gee whiz, for that kind of money, you could, I've heard estimates as high as $35. You could buy a bunch of aircraft carriers and go rule part of the world. Or you could take chip cards. I don't know about you, but ruling part of the world sounds more cool than taking a different form of payment. Heck, we'll use Bitcoin and rule the world. Anyway, not too many merchant locations. A lot of these locations are major big organizations like Target, who spent $100 million fixing their systems, but now they finally rolled them out. Walmart was pretty much first, the major retailers, 1st of August. And now you're going to see the customer experience, a lot of frustration come Black Friday and all these shopping when people, instead of swiping their card for half a second, got to stick it in there and leave it in there for 6 seconds. Seems like forever when there's 10 people in line behind you. I think we're going to see the first fights coming out pretty soon. It's probably going to be on cops, and I'm sure it's going to be down in Pinellas Park, Florida, because that's where everybody is, and the guy's going to have no shirt on. And that's always what you have to be if you want to be in cops. And it's going to be a fight about people get stuck in line for these things. So why are we doing this? Because we got this chip and pin thing. It's not really PIN. It's not, well, the chip, we call it formally Europay, MasterCard, and Visa, EMV. Note who get the first billing. And it's alphabetical. No, it's Europay. It's driven by the Europeans. It's been the standard there for several years. Up in Canada now for about 7 years. Actually, I guess 8.5 with the exchange rate. But in any case, we're finding that 19 of the 20 countries use chip and PIN, except for the US. We're special. We're different. We're going to go to chip and PIN. When? When we go to the metric system. Because we're America. Yeah. We know better. Right. So I asked the Europeans. I was over there a couple times in the last 2 months. Oh, what do we do? Oh, you Americans, you love criminals. What do you mean? You make movies about them. You elect them to public office. I mean, it's an American thing. Okay. What else? Oh, we got much worse fraud. No, we already saw those statistics. It's much worse than the U.S. They're more security conscious than Americans. I don't know, you guys had more wars in the last century than you have, although we're trying to do our best to catch up. Europeans are smarter than Americans. I'll let you decide that for yourself. But let's look at the real reason why this thing took off. Back in the United States, when you wanted to get a new phone line 25 years ago, what'd you do? You called up one of the baby bells, or even before the bell system got broken up by Judge Green, called up AT&T. Hey, it's Tuesday, you got a new phone line by Friday. So you can take these new online credit card checking things. Over in Europe, though, they're running through PTT, Postal Telephone and Telegraph. PTT is one of those ossified government organizations that takes forever to get something done. And so you talk to somebody who grew up over in France or Germany or Italy or something like that back in the 70s, or it would take you 6 to 8 months. Seriously, no kidding, to get a new phone line in. Well, you can't do that. You can't scale these little onion skin revocation lists because you'd be sending out phone books every week. And so they had to come up with something else. So the idea was, we're going to bite the bullet, we're going to pay about 10 times as much for the card, and we're going to put into the hands of the merchants a way that they can validate that the card holder and the card itself have a shared common secret. And that's really all we're talking about. By the way, the software is written in Java. For those of us who think that's a really fun idea, here's an interesting project for next year. If anybody wants to work with me on a research project, looking at the code and trying to see, because how are you going to patch a credit card? I mean, we talk about the Internet of Things, we're already into here, but a lot of our money's tied up in this stuff here. When you insert it into a reader, the device interrogates it and then asks for the user. So if you go to Europe, it's kind of nice because your card never goes in the back room. You don't see some shifty-looking person go back there skimming it a bunch of times. They bring the little machine out there and you put it in your beep, beep, boop, boop, and now you're in. Cool. Well, why can't we do that in America? Well, because we're Americans. Besides, what does it not do? It doesn't prove that there's any balance on the card. For example, if it was a debit card, you don't know if there's money. It doesn't prove necessarily if the card's even valid, if maybe it's been revoked. It doesn't prove that it hasn't been part of a large-time fraud because, and it doesn't really check for anything if your card's not present because we don't have e-commerce back in 1990. All you had was what? 1-800-Flowers. And like, you're really going to send flowers to your grandma with a stolen credit card? That's going to work really well come time for reading the will. So it doesn't do any of these things. But what it did do is it solved a different problem. Back then, it allowed them to go ahead and do computer sort of verification of what? That the card holder and the card itself shared a common secret, a PIN. That's it. Which is good when somebody stole one card. But what happens if they steal 20 million cards? See, it doesn't scale very well. Or when you think about why would you even do that today? Well, if you're in the payment card industry, and if you're a Visa or MasterCard, and you're making these ridiculous profits, good on you though, you got a monopoly. And now you got things like alternative forms of payment, Bitcoin, currency, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay. I think JP Morgan Chase just announced theirs this past week, a new form of electronic payment. We're going to see a whole sea of payment forms that are going to potentially rock this industry to the core. So remember who's driving this. It's Visa and MasterCard who are driving the shift. They want to show something, anything out to the user, the consumer, to show that, hey, somebody's doing something. But the reality is that although there's a lot of fraud being lost, Visa and MasterCard technically make money on fraud. And to a certain odd extent, banks, because they get such a big percentage, if you have a merchant bank, what are you paying, 3 to 5% to process anything from a Visa or MasterCard up to an Amex? But we don't have 3 to 5% fraud. Fraud really is around 9 to 10 basis points, 0.09%. So how do you justify 3%? You make money on the fraud because you can convince the regulators not to regulate us. It's a whole interesting system that if we drove the fraud out or very low, you couldn't support those rates anymore, and you'd have to lower your rates, which would lower the cost to merchants, which would lower your prices. Now, as we get to this October 1st deadline, and now that we're past it, we found out that it was a big thing, was like Y2K. It's like, okay, what happened? Not a whole lot, but we find out that a lot of efforts were made to try to go ahead and steal stuff. So let's take a quick look at a couple of these things. Target, 40 million cards stolen. So the guy who stole the cards, what's he going to do? Is he going to cash them out himself? Seriously? No way. What do? Is you take all these cards and you're going to sell them off to some criminal gang. So we get someone like Al here. He's going to stand in there for a criminal gang leader. And Al and his gang are going to buy a whole bunch of cards. And in fact, lots of gangs are going to buy lots of cards, and then all these cards work their way into circulation. See, what you're starting to see here now for the first time is there is an ecosystem. There is an entire underground economy that starts not even with this, but the person who wrote the malware, who first did the memory scraping, selling it to the person who implemented it, who then sells the cards off in batches to a major website like a Rescator. And yeah, before I remind myself, should have some websites here. Yeah, if you go to their underground site here. Anybody recognize this fine gentleman here? Brian Krebs, yeah. Runs a great security blog. I'd like to meet the guy. He lives right here in Northern Virginia. Although it's interesting because in his exposés about, I'm in the underground hacking your stuff and learning your wares, he's publishing all this and he's actually pointing out to the criminals some of their operational security errors and failures. So what are the crooks doing? They're fixing it. So although they don't seem to like him, to a certain extent, he's kind of a hero of the Soviet Union because he is enabling the criminals to get free consulting to fix their errors, and now the banks are paying millions more trying to fix the stuff. You go to their website, refund and replace policy. They move around a little bit because, yeah, they're technically extra legal, but if you pay your host country the right amount of money, you get to stick around for a while. And you can go look for cards. Hard to see in the back of the room. That'll teach you to pretend you're in church. You should have sat up front. But you can find here cards, $10, $17, $6. Why? Because that Chase card was getting ready to expire at the end of the month. But what they have is they give you the individual dumps, the batches that they came out of, and they give you a percentage. Because when the Target stuff first came out, they were rated at 100%. Why? Because none of the banks, none of the merchants, none of the card holders knew their card was compromised. You had a 100% chance of that card being good if you bought it early on. They're still for sale. They're down around 30% or so because what's happened? After a year and a half, a lot of these cards age because typically you're 3 years old, so statistically 50% are dead. Bigger banks just bit the bullet and reissued it, but smaller banks, credit unions and things like that, a little bit concerned about the fixed cost of reissuing cards. Depending on how big you are, it could be anywhere from $3 to $12 to reissue the card, send it out in the mail. So they're just saying, we're going to suck it up and take our chances. And some banks, it's turned out to be a multi-million-dollar decision error. But you can actually get here zip code, city, state, the last 4 digits. I was searching for specific last 4 digits to match one of my card. The first 6 digits are what's called a BIN, the bank identification number. So one of the things that Brian was pointing out is that, hey, with the first 6 digits for the BIN, knowing the bank, knowing the last 4 digits, knowing the city and the state and the zip code, do you think you could triangulate on your customers and figure out which ones are for sale and then preemptively kill them? Right, why would you point this out to the criminals? Okay, this is an operational security error that they've been making that has allowed clever banks to spot stuff like that. Now, you don't want to kill them all or someone will reverse engineer what you're doing. So again, this is a little game that you're playing where you're trying to go ahead and you're trying to pop them a little bit at a time. Do it in a strategy so that they're not going to figure out exactly how do you know what you know. You go back and you look at World War II and the Enigma. And the challenge that came up for Britain when they learned that the Germans were going to bomb Coventry, firebomb, killing hundreds, maybe thousands of their citizens, what do? Do you evacuate the city and let the Nazis know that you can crack their code, at which point you never read another message, or do you take the hit? And that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? But those are tough problems. That's life and death. But you got to start thinking the same way in this type of because this is economic warfare. This is huge. So criminals will get around with these low-value tests. They said you had years to go ahead and poke around to these things and figure out what'll work. So here's this ecosystem I was talking about. What happens is that you buy the cards, you steal them, you sell it to the next guy, sell it to the next guy, sell it to the next guy. Why are you ever going to buy a list of stolen credit cards that could be revoked at any time by the bank? What do you want to make sure that they're going to do? They're still going to work, right? So how do you know they're still going to work? You run this little micro test because I understand if I get a call from my bank, we just canceled your card because someone tried to spend $857 over in London. Okay, got it. But they said, we're canceling your card because somebody spent $1.37 at a Starbucks. Seriously, you bank? You guys are nuts. But, so what do? You run a little test like at Starbucks, and you run it through a hotel test. We've literally cataloged a couple thousands of these tests, which allow you then to go ahead and run under the radar, because you do a little test early on, and then what do? You void it out. You cancel the transaction. So what happens? The bank pays nothing because the merchant doesn't get money. The merchant might have had their credentials stolen. They don't even know what's going on. The card holder sees nothing on their statement. Nothing happened. Except for what? So this guy's selling you the pack and stack of cards. You take this 100 cards, you run a little test, run a little test, run a little test. Other 100 cards, 100 work, or 98 or 50. It's like, I guess in the movies you see them doing the heroin packets. They're always like tasting it. I don't know what heroin's supposed to taste like. I mean, maybe they're just making sure it's not powdered sugar or something, or powdered milk. I don't know, but it's sort of like tasting the credit card numbers. So anyway, what they'll do is now the bank doesn't see this, the bank doesn't see that. They get no visibility until this, boom, this cash out at the end. And here's the crazy thing. People seem to think that a card gets stolen and then gets used a few minutes later. It could be weeks and sometimes months. We've seen cards in the underground for over a year, working their way through the system. It's old stock, it still sells, but hey, if the validity rate on this batch is down to 20%, you're only paying a few pennies per card instead of a couple bucks. It's worth it to give it a try, particularly if you're doing online, because what's your risk? No one's going to arrest you, especially if you're coming through Tor. So now what happens to do is the big challenge is trying to figure out, can we spot these tests and kill the cards before the cash out? That way we can figure that stuff. That's kind of the problem I've been focusing on here. This is not a sales pitch because I'm outside now in my computer security world working on bank stuff, but it's a really fun problem to take the way that we think about problems and apply it to different areas of industry. So the current problem is what? We try to profile users. Hey, users are difficult to profile. Why? Because they do anomalous things. We're humans. So, did you ever get a call from your bank, or did you ever get a transaction that didn't work? Yeah, that's a false positive, okay? What's the problem with a false positive? Well, they're annoying and they're embarrassing. Hey, I've been doing a startup, which means I'm eating at things like Subway all day long. Now I'm finally getting an important meeting with some bank. I take them out to like a fancy French restaurant, trying to wine and dine this client, and then the waiter comes back. And sorry, sir, your credit card has been declined. Yeah. As only a French waiter could say. Pardon my French accent there. But what comes out of that is what? You're horribly embarrassed. And what we find out is a big percentage of customers who just take that card and either never use it again or stick it in the back of the wallet. What card vendors want you to have, they want you at front of the wallet. They want their card to be first there. So what's in your wallet? By the way, yeah, I did bring a card reader so we could do some scanning. Remind me to do this. I'll show you some cool stuff and some frightening stuff as well. But imagine your kid comes home with a box of crickets or cockroaches and they've got 500 of them. Do you want to find out 2 hours later and then chase them all around the house? Or do you want to get the kid on the front doorstep? No, young man, you turn around and get rid of that thing. And so that's the whole idea, is trying to change this entire fraud paradigm around. Now what we look at this false positive, huge amount of lost sales. By the way, 13 times the cost of false negatives. If we lose $12 billion to card fraud, but we give up $118 billion in false positive fraud, because it's not really fraud, it's just denied transactions. This is deals that just don't go through. That's huge impact. And so, as I say, people stop trying. And so, here's the challenge. Where's the fraud in there? There are 2 fraudulent transactions on that screen. That's a big data dump. Yes, someone's staying to take a picture. Good luck with the resolution. And yes, I did change the card numbers to protect the innocent. But this stuff comes pouring in. If you're a major bank, you might be getting literally millions of transactions every 24 hours. I hate to be cliche, talk about big data, but in a way it's that sort of a problem. You're trying to look at this big, huge stream of information, and typically what financial companies do is you look at it at the instant it comes in, because you've got a small amount of time to make a decision. Now in this case, what we've done is we've taken a little bit different look. We said, hey, wait a minute, instead of just looking at a transaction, good or bad, is this grandma, is she in Ohio, is it a small transaction? That's a fast set of rules. Now we say, who else are you shopping with? Because if you're doing card fraud, it doesn't scale very well if you're only doing 1 card at a time. By that I mean that if I'm going to go online, steal 1 card, get in the car, drive down to Walmart, go buy a gift card, then run back, go ahead, buy another stuff. No, you take 50 at a time. Or if you're on the wholesaling, you're going to do literally 1,000 or up to 1,000,000 at a time. Huge blocks of the stuff move around. And now what we find out is this particular card we were tracking went shopping in 6 different places. That was very suspicious. Why? Because the card had already been killed. It was a dead card. This is a zombie. The card holder had already had their card reissued. They cut up the old card, threw it away, and yet the card is still out shopping. How could that be? Because not all crooks are very careful, and sometimes people kind of hey, you never know, that card that didn't work last week, maybe the card holder put money onto it. So what we did then is we said, hey, let's take a look at kind of a guilt by association, and we found out that was same card, it was used here with 50 other cards, all in a very short period of time, all for the identical transaction. And what does that tell you? Those other 50 cards are all stolen. We didn't know about any of them. It turns out there's a Coke machine in one particular part of California. It's on a loading dock. And about once a week, I think it's Fridays nights around 10 p.m., it must be a bus. 50 people from around America line up in front of that Coke machine, and they all buy exactly one Coke at about 20-second intervals. What's going on here, right? Somebody's got a new stack of cards. And by the way, remember that food chain that we saw? That's not somebody up here, because they're going to reverse it. You can't reverse the purchase of a Coke. So this is somebody who's getting ready to drive down to the store and cash out. And when you cash out, what are you going to buy? Best thing you buy is a gift card. Why? Because then you can fence the gift card and you've laundered the money. Yeah, you can buy merchandise and you got to return the merchandise. Oh, I lost my receipt. Then we'll have to give you a gift card. Okay, that's a good thing. Here is what most people don't understand what's happening in there, is that when I go to a merchant, I go shopping, there's an order system or it could just be a point of sale. That information then gets sent to their merchant bank. They have an acquiring bank that may then go through a payment processor, sort of aggregates all that, which then gets into your switch, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, etc. That switch then sends over to the issuing bank, which will authorize it, send it back up here, account, check it, validate it, come back. That's about a 3 to 4 second round trip. So when you swipe your card, or now dip your card, as the correct term is, the verb, that's what's happening. Well, what do you mean? What's banks, everybody else has been doing? They've been waiting from this 3, 6, 10, 12-month cycle of things getting stolen to the last 3 seconds to take a look. Seriously? It's like, why do you want to wait till the bullet's already in the air before you decide there's a sniper out there? Maybe you should do a little bit of preemptive stuff as well. So if you understand this ecosystem, you can also see where you can go do stuff. And now if you understand how people work, we find out that all these different tests that are out there, I said we found a couple thousands of them, have different visibility. So I'm at a hotel. Hotel tests are great because hotels, when you check in, even if your room is prepaid, what do they want? A card for incidentals. Do they charge your card? No, they do what they call a pre-authorization. What a pre-auth does is it says, hey, I'm going to pre-authorize $200. So if you walk out of here and we find out that you emptied the minibar because you had the munchies or something like that, because it's in Oregon or Washington or Denver, they must sell a lot in the minibar these days. I still have that Girl Scout who made a fortune selling cookies outside a marijuana shop, and they kind of called a foul, and I says, come on. In any case, they can get their money. If you check in, get your pre-auth done on Monday, and then on Tuesday you cancel your card saying it was stolen, the hotel still gets their money because they have locked out that money, which is why you don't want to use a debit card to rent a car, because they're going to block out like $50,000 or something like that, and you get it back 2 weeks later. Fake merchants, of course, you won't see that. Card verified brute force. I'm not going to go into the details in the chart. The whole idea is there's a lot of different ways you can look at this stuff. And remember, if you're a crook and you've been doing this for a couple of years, you share it, you put it out there on YouTube videos, you put it in .onion. There's all kinds of places you can go ahead and get resources to learn how to do card fraud and get good at it. And what we're doing is we're just saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a link analysis problem, isn't it? Instead of looking at it one-dimensionally, which is here's your card, and every time your card is presented for a new transaction, we make a one-time decision, does this look like you? So 50 people go into that Coke machine have what? 50 people that are all being asked, do you look like you? Well, buying a Coke is not that unusual, so they all go through. Never triggers an alarm. Nobody's saying 50 people from around the country going to the same Coke machine should trigger an alarm. And oh, by the way, let's pull back on that. And now, because of PCI, DSS, the data security standards, banks can't share certain data. You're not allowed to. Crooks can share it. It's kind of a weird world. So all these things link together. Here's a real example. Again, change a little bit of the data to make sure that it was anonymized. But think about that ecosystem. Legitimate cardholder in June goes to Amazon, gets a $1 authorization that is reversed, and 7 minutes later there's an $11 charge. Live, real, or fraud. That's real, because that's what Amazon does. You enter a card, they're going to say, does this thing work? And if it does work, they let you go to checkout. If it doesn't work, they don't let you go to checkout. Number two, now 4 days later, Apple online, $2 charge. Good? Sure, why not? Now, a month later, there's a Cabela's. What's that? Sporting goods store? Yeah. $12.66 authorization that is reversed. No harm, no foul so far. But then, the following month, we see a Holiday Inn, $7.82 pre-authorization, also reversed. And then 2 weeks later, a Gymboree for $7. That's approved. And then a few minutes later, Euro Car Parts, $448. Works, Eurostar, $110. Works, Punky Fish, $625. Bam, 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 bam. The hammer in that debit card. Within a matter of seconds, they've emptied out almost $1,200 out of that card. Maxed it out. Now, let's do a little bit of analysis here, what we think we know about what's going on. Is it the same crook doing all this stuff? No, because they got a different MO. Because we found another card, just had 2 charges on it. The same date at Cabela's, almost the same time for the same amount, $12.66. What does that tell you? That crook is the same person because they do the same merchant for the same amount. Now, at 28 August at 8:51 as compared to 28 August at 8:51, so it's probably an automated script. Euro Car Parts 448, Euro Car Parts 442. Different crook doing what? Modifying their numbers a little bit. You see, you can start to look at the data and figure out who's where in the food chain. Oh, by the way, they got NSF. Why? Because the card only had $380. They tried to hit it for $440. If they tried it for $370, you'd win. But most time you want to get in there, get the money, and go. And as soon as you get the merchandise, you get it shipped someplace or you get a gift card, you're home free. And the idea being is that now the bank's stuck to deal with the loss. And there's all kinds of things we can find. These clones, as we call them, they're copies of the legitimate card. The Track 2, which is what's on the mag stripe on the back of the card. So you look at any card, whether it's a hotel card or a credit card, you got a mag stripe and potentially up to 3 tracks of data here. Full mag stripe copy, that's useful. Why? Because you can clone the card. CVV, the 3-digit code printed on the back of your card or 4-digit on the front of the Amex is not encoded in the mag stripe. Better not be unless you got a really dumb bank. Which tells you then that if a card is a card present compromise, which means they got the mag stripe data, it doesn't become a card not present compromise where somebody has to enter in the 3-digit CVV. So there's a pretty good firewall in between these 2 types of fraud, unless somebody gets what we call the fulls. If they got everything, you got it. So if I'm running a skim or if I'm at a restaurant or something and I skim your card and I write down the 3 digits as well, I got it. Or if you look at Target where they lost 40 million cards but 70 million customer records with addresses and things like that. Now if I'm trying to hack grandma in Ohio, I don't go ahead and buy her card if I'm out in East Los Angeles. I buy it if I'm in Ohio. And then what happens is the credit card fraud algorithms go, $800 purchase. I guess grandma's upgrading her television set because she hasn't made a big purchase in 3 years. Must be legit. Boom, it goes through because the more you know about your target, the better you can do. I'll show you some jumpers and things like that and train wreck cards. And I already showed you a zombie. It's already been killed. It's out shopping. So what we find then is that criminals and the behavior are such that there are certain things you got to do to make this crime scale. You can't do 1 card at a time. You usually do 20, 30, 50, 100. There's big batches because it's a batch processing. When you can see enough of the batch, you can start to infer patterns. A lot of times they buy exactly the same items for the same merchant. Some crooks are smarter. They'll mix up the dollar amounts a little. Oftentimes, they may only appear once before cash out. Now, as we're getting a more sophisticated ecosystem, we find that they appear 2 or 3 times as they move from the wholesaler to the retailer, if you will, to the gang member, and who, by the way, at the very end, you get a mule. Typical card gets popped for about $250, plus or minus. So here's the deal. Hey, you want to make some money? Here's 50 cards. You go back and you bring me back $10,000 worth of stuff, gift cards. Anything more, you keep. Anything less, I break your legs. Well, that might not seem like a bad deal. And so what you can do is if you start to get inside this decision cycle, you can start to mess with these ecosystems. Somebody goes out there and they start panicking when all the cards that they knew were good half an hour ago, half of them don't work anymore. And so what you can do is you're going to sow a little bit of hate and discontent in there. And now we find out that even the chip cards can get cloned as well. We've seen some great talks. Kristen Padgett did a couple things a couple years ago. She talked about near-field communications cards. I know Major Malfunction talked about cloning the chip cards. So there's the technologies out there. It just raises the cost of doing it wholesale. Instead of costing you 20 to 30 cents a card, you might be spending $3 a card. And that's a fixed cost if you're a criminal trying to do all that stuff. But there's easier ways to do it. So like we've seen in every other country that's gone over to the chips, what do? We go to online fraud. Even better. Why? Because you don't have to present yourself in front of the merchant, in front of cameras where there might be a possibility the local sheriff could pick you up. So what we're doing is we're just whack-a-mole. We push the fraud down here, and it pops up right over there. And so here's a card. This is a train wreck. We see the 001 are legit cards. This is a real customer. Up here, there's a Marriott, Pulsar, Global E-commerce. Boom. All of a sudden, on the 22nd, we started to see $67, $591, $55, one, ba-bam, ba-bam, until finally the card ran out of money, 059. But it's still going, bam, ba-bam, 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 because it's an automated script. It's not smart enough to stop because, well, maybe the card's temporary, it might work again. But what does this tell you? If you're on the defense, now I know a list of the merchant IDs that they're trying to use to run it against. You see, you leak a little bit of information every time, and you can learn more and more about your opponents. A jumper, we found this card moving around, card present, real card holder in California, card not present, and now we find within 4 minutes the card goes from Illinois to Alaska in a card present transaction. Not going to happen. And so again, crooks make mistakes. Little mistakes that don't seem significant because a lot of the people at the end of this whole pipeline are going to go ahead and they're trying to cash out. They're not the sophisticated crooks who are upstream, who are making sure that they don't take any part of this end game. By the way, when Target was hacked, one of the first questions I got called from one of the banks, hey, G-Mark, you think they got the pins? Because if they had the pins to all the debit cards, wow, it's like game over. And so I did a little bit of quick research, and you find out that the company that manufactures the pin pads uses a special key cryptographic protocol that was developed by the ANSI Banking Committee, X9. Here's the crazy thing. I helped write that standard in 1992. It's still around. And what it was, there's one major key for the merchant, another one for the device, and every single transaction had its own separate key. So every pin came out with a separate key. And so when they found out that they were using the stuff that I helped write 25 years ago, I was like, cool, you're good. So within half an hour, I could tell the bank, don't worry about it. And it turned out it was the right call. So what happens then? You get social engineering and brute force. By the way, there's no 3 tries and you're out on a credit card in this hacking. So we see things coming in, 0000, 001, 02, 03, blah, blah, blah. On the average, 500 to get a CVV, 5,000 tries to go ahead and hack a PIN. They don't time out. Or we go ahead and social engineer. Hello, Mr. Wilson. Hi, this is your bank calling. Hi, this is Peggy. And we understand you were shopping at Target. Well, we want to protect you. We're going to issue you a new card because we don't want you to be liable for any of the fraud that might have been done. Oh, wow, what a great bank. Of course, you're already covered by Reg E anyway, but most people don't know that. So what we'd like to do is to just verify your current information. I'm going to send you over to our automated system and ask you to validate your PIN. Now, don't tell it to me. No bank employee is ever going to ask you for a PIN, so don't ever give that up, but it's okay to tell it to the computer. So wait a minute. Please enter your PIN. Beep, boop, boop. Thank you very much. Your card will be on its way in 7 to 10 days. Thank you for being a customer of Big Bank. Of course, your card gets emptied out within the next few minutes, and we see a lot of this social engineering. So look into social engineering training for your family, your friends, your companies, and things like that. The zombie, I showed you this thing. We had the little zombie thing. It goes out there. It travels around. It clones itself. We saw the big spread. It goes everywhere, zipping through some of these things here. But we find out that when clones are born, what they do is that they have different characteristics. So I can tell the type of fraud will trace back to the type of compromise. And so online, as I said, if online, I can go to YouTube, I can get a whole bunch of videos, I can learn how to do this, and for the most part, once you're online, if you get away with something, you got away with it. If it involves shipping merchandise, yeah, well, it's got to actually leave the loading dock, and it usually goes to an abandoned house or some other drop place, and merchants typically just share that list of bad addresses. But if I'm buying now one of these gift cards that is just electronic information, it's not physical, once I got it, because I can shift it over to a gift card exchange company and have that thing sold within 5 minutes. I can launder my laundered money. All kinds of tests that are out there. Again, go online if you want to look at it some more. Kind of zipping through here mostly because this is just an encyclopedic list of things to think about. Not so much cheating out of information, but basically telling you that as you see these things, that there's a lot of stuff going on. So as you look at how are we going to protect this ecosystem in the future, we got to worry about all these cash outs. Merchandise that gets brought in back the next day. Hey, I can't use it. It's the wrong size. I don't like it. I bought extra. That's okay. Here's your gift card. Exactly what the crook wants. And now be careful when you buy used gift cards on the underground market because you'll, oh wow, look, I'm saving money. I did that for my brother a few years ago before I started getting into card fraud prevention because he was working on his house. So I bought him a whole bunch of Home Depot gift cards. But what did I do? I got a discount on them because I bought them someplace. Turned out the lady said, yeah, these are stolen. People steal stuff off of a job site. They bring it back for merchandise credit. Well, you don't want to be part of that fraud ecosystem, but it's just sort of the cost of doing business, unfortunately. You can block certain transactions, and now we find out that there's certain dollar values. Hey, a $50 gift card that has a transaction fee, that could be a hit because it's $4.95, so $54.95 is a blacklisted number. So you buy a candy bar at the same time you buy a gift card, and now you throw off the algorithms. Again, it's trivial to defeat these existing fixed algorithms because they're just like a bunch of rule sets. So I look for bad merchants, I look for weak merchants, anything of value I can send to mail drops. All these are ways that I cash out and I'm able to go ahead and get stuff out of there. So banks are spending a fortune on these cards. They say they're going from about 30 cents to $3 a card. And all these little chips are expensive. By the way, it'd be interesting to take a look more at them. Merchants are spending a fortune on this technology. It's anywhere from $8 to $30 billion when all is said and done with all these new readers. And of course, criminals are trying to cash these out. And as Al there, these folks are trying to make a ton of money off of this stuff, and it's working pretty well. So that's a little quick insight. By the way, I got a mag stripe here. I'm going to show you a couple things, but that's the formal presentation on this. But let me shift over real quick. Got a couple questions? Now that the smart chip has been available, the cost of the fraud is it's pushed to the merchant if the merchant does not invest in a chip card reader. If the bank... How it's going to play out? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out because, it can't be cloned. Well, it has been done, and it's been demonstrated at DEF CON a couple of times and other hacker conferences. It's more expensive to do it, but it can be done, especially if you can find a flaw in that Java. So what's going to happen then is going to be a lot of blaming game. No, yes, arguing about it. It's going to all get fought out. And the problem is ultimately, you, the user, if you're a victim of somebody cloning your chipped card, in the early days, you just couldn't get your money back because they would argue it was mathematically impossible. Well, we've since proven it is possible. It's just difficult. Once somebody gets through a breakthrough on that, though, it's going to be a whole game changer. So again, recognize that credit cards and plastic goes back to the 1950s, and are we getting to a different thing where, for the most part, our new means of doing commerce is not going to be plastic, but it's going to be electronic. It's silicon. And I think this is what's happening with all these card companies. They're going, hey, you know what? We've got an entrenched marketplace, but look at Kodak. They missed the turn. You can't buy Kodachrome anymore. Companies that missed the turn because they were so entrenched and so in love with their own technology. And so recognize that I think going forward, we're going to see some real risks out there. Other thoughts or questions? Yes, sir. Right, I mentioned that. Well, you select not relinquishing your cards in restaurants. Well, if all they have is a reader in the back, because some of these things are fixed, they're actually attached to the card, they're not going to drag that entire cash register out to you. You are not at risk for more than $50 based upon Regulation D, Regulation E, signed back in the Carter administration. But I'd avoid dodgy restaurants. I'd avoid people that look weird. If you're really, really, really worried about it, pay cash. Or use a gift card that has a limit. And then once it goes to zero, it goes to zero. But that's a little bit more expensive for you, the customer. But we're starting to see competing technologies with the near-field communications like Apple Pay going to currency, which is going to do QR code, a lot of different things. But yeah, you're right. That's always unnerved European folks, and they think of the U.S. as a high-risk area when they come here for credit card fraud. And the problem is I go over there with my chip, and it's not chip and PIN. I call up Amex. I pay a lot of money for that fancy American Express card. Oh, we don't issue PINs unless you're not in the U.S. It says, but everybody uses them. I go to buy groceries, and there you got to wait in line for 5 minutes for someone to come out to get you to sign a little piece of paper. When you're at the grocery, it's like, seriously? Everybody else, bing, boom, and out. It's inconvenient. But they figure, oh, Americans aren't smart enough to learn how to use PINs. I think the reality check is that if we got everything that way, we might see fraud go down. You couldn't support those charges that the banks are able to levy onto the merchants, and that would change the ecosystem, really cut profits. Durbin Amendment did a lot to cut profits by forcing certain merchants, certain banks to have to use multiple paths to process their stuff. How are we doing on time? Good? Wrap it up? All right, that's what I try to do, is wrap up on time. Okay, so we're really good. By the way, if you want to see what's on your wallet, I've got a little card reader here. No, this is not a skimmer. This doesn't fit in your hand, but this is a Track 2 reader, and it's interesting because you find out that on the back of your card, you got your credit card number and 11-digit security code. By the way, the 11-digit security code I was going to show you for my USAA bank card is 11 zeros. Seriously, guys? Okay, anyway, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed a little insight on card fraud, and welcome to BSides.